What's that? Oh my word, it's a giant ravenous monster heading straight for us from the silver screen of horror cinema. It's a shark, or a horde of flesh-eating slugs, or a 12-story leviathan that shoots its offspring off a set of strange biocannons on its knees. Either way, it's a pretty effective sandwich for a classic form of horror. They go together hand in hand really, terrifying monsters and all the trappings of horror that come with them. In many ways, creature feature horror is the very definition of the function of what truly affects us on the screen, because when you boil it all down, all it takes is a frighteningly effective monster to scare us witless. Let's see. Hello horror fans, what's going on? And once again, welcome back to the Scariest channel on YouTube, Top 5 Scary Videos. As per usual, I'll be your horror host, Jack Finch, as today we curiously take a look at the top 5 scariest creature feature horror movies. Roll the clip. For the curious amongst you, of course, that scene was from 1979's Alien, the first ever cinematic depiction of the xenomorph, and of course, that particular titan of science fiction horror would make the top of our list every single time when it comes to horror of the creature feature variety. However, much like the other film as well as John Carpenter's The Thing, we've covered them time and time again on this channel, and by now it goes without saying that they're worthy of note. So yeah, honourable mention. Also stick 2006 is the host on that honourable pile too, because it's the definition of creature feature, but yeah, we've covered it quite a lot. And double also, let's not even get started on Godzilla, because that's a different story entirely. Kicking off at number 5, The Burrowers, 2008.
We don't quit. We don't sleep.
It's like you found yourself a hole in the ground there, Will.
A surprise entry for an otherwise surprisingly effective horror movie, and it will be even more of a shocker to fully realise that this film is in fact a western. Yeah, exactly, a western, a creature feature horror. Who would have thought it? But in fact, 2008's The Burrowers is certainly worthy of a look-see, and when we boil down the bones of what makes a creature feature horror worth its salt for a relatively low-budget horror, this one has a few lessons to teach us. Written and directed by J.T. Petty, the man responsible for writing the Outlast video game series, The Burrowers tells the tale of a group of pioneers in 1879 who venture through the Dakota territories in their attempt to try and build a new life out in the wild, wild west. Sadly for them though, during that time the colonists begin getting picked off one by one, and then a series of strange holes begin to appear. Now this film is incredibly reminiscent of the classic horror comedy creature feature 1990s Tremors, which is 100% worthy of making a list similar to this, but of course we're compiling this list for horror rather than humour, and if you've seen Tremors you'll know it is damn hilarious. You see, like Tremors, The Burrowers lives up to the promise made by any creature feature horror movie. The creatures, as in, you know, the most important part of the movie, are actually terrifying in this film, and they are. Also, the cast of this film is stacked with 90s cinema goodness, starring William Mapotha, Sean Patrick Thomas, Doug Hitchinson, and none other than Clancy Brown himself. Yeah, although it may not seem it, The Burrowers is a surprisingly effective movie and well worth a watch for any fan of creature feature horror. Swinging in at number 4, Mimic, 1997.
Nobody up there knows about this.
Nobody would. Not until it's too late. These things can imitate us, they can infiltrate us and breed a legion before anyone would even notice.
Alright guys, this one may come across as being noteworthy of a little bit of nostalgia, but if we're being honest, I'm pretty confident that nostalgia and creature feature are a subgenre of horror cinema that were meant to go together. However, much like our previous entry, The Burrowers, part of what makes this movie so good is the surprising stance it takes in subverting common tropes to prove its point. In many ways, Mimic was ahead of its time following its release back in 1997, and what director better suited to deliver such a bold promise? Of course, our man Guillermo del Toro, although famously he hated making this film. Written and directed by del Toro, based upon the short story of the same name by Donald A. Wollheim, Mimic tells the tale of a scientist and entomologist named Dr. Susan Tyler, played by Mira Sorvino, who is fantastic in this movie, may I add, and whose character is responsible for developing a species of insect known as Judas to eradicate a deadly disease spread by cockroaches in downtown New York. Now, in typical late 90s science-based horror, although Dr. Tyler is successful in wiping out the disease, things very quickly and very rapidly go awry. It's also pretty important to note that if you're creeped out by insects, particularly highly intelligent insects with a knack for rapidly evolving, then there are many many moments in this film that will gross you out. It's strange because Mimic is oddly one of Del Toro's lesser known releases, and although it didn't exactly shake things up at the box office stylistically, it's perhaps one of his most visceral horror creations. As you'd expect from Guillermo, the physical effects in this film are top notch for the time, and the psychology behind the Judas insects are surprisingly horrifying. Evolution is really messed up, and you just need to watch this film to realise that. Oh, and also Josh Brolin and Norman Reedus are in this film, so yeah, give it a watch just for that. Next up at number 3, Cloverfield, 2008.
Okay, well, I mean, what about police, fire department? I couldn't get through. Okay, it just seems a little...
You know what? Still to this day, this film gets quite a lot of hate, and I have no idea why. One of the biggest criticisms of this movie is that the shaky camera work is too much, and watching it gives people a headache. I mean, okay, yeah, that's fine, but maybe avoid found footage horror if you're not in the mood for that, because the equation is simple. Handheld camera, being chased through the streets of Manhattan by a giant, terrifying monstrosity, and yeah, unless you've got a Steadicam vest, by proxy, things are going to be a bit shaky. And whilst we're on the topic, creature feature aside, 2008's Cloverfield is perhaps one of the finest demonstrations of found footage horror ever. It really is, and I think it gets a bum deal because Cloverfield is fantastic, and it's a much more important film than it's given credit for. Written by Drew Goddard, directed by Matt Reeves, and produced by the contemporary legend of science fiction, J.J. Abrams. For all intents and purposes, Cloverfield is the horror amalgamation of the legendary Kaiju and Godzilla series. You see, Cloverfield was made with a reverence for those movies, which have held an important place in both science fiction and horror, but let's not beat about the bush. They're anything but scary. I mean, they're awesome, but yeah, Mothra isn't exactly the kind of visual monstrosity known to induce nightmares, really. Cloverfield, on the other hand, whilst admittedly being more thriller than horror, is genuinely anxiety-inducing. It's a white-knuckle ride, mainly spurred on by its found footage credentials, but it stands on its own merits as a genuinely effective horror-ridden thrill ride. Also, again, the most important facet of this list, the titular creature behind the feature, is more than worthy of note. We know so little about the Cloverfield monster that in itself serves to propel the horror behind this movie. It's Lovecraftian, or it could be, and that's reason enough to give this movie a watch. Yeah, the characters might be a little bit annoying, but hey, we're watching this film to see a first-hand account of New York being torn apart by a cosmic horror of unknown aquatic proportions. What did you expect? Coming in at number 2, Pumpkinhead, 1988. And I'm sure that this one will raise a few smiles amongst you die-hard horror fans, and in all reality, this film is perhaps the literal definition of the term. They don't make movies like this anymore, because really, they don't, and sadly, gone are the days that the likes of Pumpkinhead will make their way to the forefront of horror cinema. In many ways, creature feature horror itself is a dated concept, and it takes films like Cloverfield to reinvent the form and rearrange it for a new generation of horror fans. Pumpkinhead was the last cycle of those films, released just before the 90s loomed their ugly head and horror cinema decided how best to reinvent itself. On the surface, Pumpkinhead is a slasher movie with one of the most inventive and memorable horror monsters ever created, but beneath that surface is actually a highly intelligent film, an almost gothic tale of love, vengeance and redemption that is surprisingly effective. Written and directed by Stan Winston in his directorial debut, 1988's Pumpkinhead was made by a die-hard fan of physical effects. It was his job, and yeah, whilst the visuals of this film are indeed slightly dated, the craft poured into this film by Winston is second to none. It tells the tale of a man named Ed Harley, the owner of a small store in the countryside of rural USA, whose young son, during a terrible accident at the hands of a group of out-of-town youngsters, is tragically killed. Seeking vengeance, Ed employs the wisdom of a local witch who instructs him to carry out an ancient ritual that will bring a terrible monster to life to enact his revenge. The price of that? Well, that's why you should watch this movie, but really, start to finish, Pumpkinhead really is the definition of creature feature horror, and it's a must-see for any fan of horror, cult horror or otherwise horror. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, The Descent, 2005. And while some of you may be a tad surprised to see this movie take our number 1 spot, I hear you, but first and foremost, let me explain. I thought long and hard about what a true, genuinely fear-inducing creature feature horror could be. You see, in many ways, we don't exactly watch creature feature movies for the sake of getting scared, right? In some ways, the subgenre itself is similar to horror comedy, which is perhaps why films like Tremors, Anaconda, Lake Placid, and Eight-Legged Freaks are so successful. You see, we watch these movies for their passion behind horror cinema, to visually witness all of the tropes and styles that make them so appealing. Gross physical effects, witty one-liners, a titular monstrosity of a creature feature. But you see, Neil Marshall's fantastic 2006 horror The Descent does all of those things, and yet its very specific recipe is terrifying. The Descent is scary on so many levels. If you're claustrophobic, this film will be stressful for you on another level. If you're scared of remote locations out in the wilderness, The Descent has got something for you. And if you're scared by the prospect of a species of subterranean cannibals that hunt their prey using echolocation, then I hate to break it to you, but The Descent may be the most terrifying film that you've ever seen. You see, we've covered this film on several occasions over here at Top 5 Scary Videos, and the thing is, we have reason to, because it works on so many different levels. And strangely enough, I'm not entirely sure why, because on the surface, this movie isn't exactly the most impressive of pedigrees. It's got a relatively unknown cast, and it was created on the back of Neil Marshall's brilliant yet otherwise unknown 2002 horror Dog Soldiers, and yet deep within it, this film is one of the most well-crafted horror movies of the 2000s. I almost don't want to say anything about the film's plot or the creatures in question, because if you haven't yet seen it, really, you're in for a treat with this movie. Well, there we have it, our list for the top 5 scariest creature feature horror movies. What do you guys think? Do you agree? Disagree? Have any intriguing insights to add? Then please let us know your thoughts down in the comment section below, as well as any choice picks of your own. Before we depart from today's video though, let's first take a quick look at some of your more creative comments from over the past few days. First up, chapter 13 says, in the intro, you uttered the name of the most terrifying, sanity-devouring, mind-splintering horror ever to manifest, and it gave me nightmares. Please, Jack, don't mention Coldplay again. Yeah, sorry about that, man. I promise it won't happen again. Lights will guide me home and ignite my burns. And next up, Kings of Horror says, thank you for making this video. It gives us a few new ones to watch. Skull emoji. Hey, that's not a problem at all, Kings of Horror. I'm glad that you enjoyed, and cheers for stopping by and leaving a nice little message. That's really kind of you. 2 skull emojis. Well, on that note, unfortunately this is what we've got time for in today's video. Cheers for sticking around all the way until the end. If you were a fan of this video or just top 5 scary videos in general, then please be a dear and hit that thumbs up button, as well as that subscribe bell, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. As per usual, I've been your horror host, Jack Finch. You've been watching Top 5 Scary Videos, and until next time, you take it easy.